The Yemeni Civil War, which began in 2014, is one of the most devastating conflicts of the 21st century, rooted in decades of political unrest, tribal divisions, and regional power struggles. The war has not only torn Yemen apart, but has also drawn in global powers, turning it into a proxy battlefield. For an older audience that values historical depth and context, understanding the Yemeni Civil War requires looking beyond just the recent fighting and examining the historical and geopolitical forces that led to this prolonged crisis. The roots of the conflict. To fully grasp the Yemeni Civil War, we must go back to the early 20th century when North and South Yemen were separate entities. North Yemen was ruled by the Mutawakkilite Kingdom, while South Yemen became a British protectorate. In 1962, North Yemen underwent a revolution, overthrowing the monarchy and leading to a civil war between Republicans and Royalists. Meanwhile, South Yemen gained independence from Britain in 1967 and formed a socialist state. By 1990, the two Yemens unified under President Ali Abdullah Saleh. However, tensions between the former North and South persisted, culminating in a brief civil war in 1994. Saleh, a master of political survival, ruled with an iron grip, using tribal alliances and patronage to maintain power. However, widespread corruption, economic hardship, and rising discontent created fertile ground for rebellion. Despite efforts to modernize Yemen's economy and infrastructure, deep-seated tribal divisions and sectarian differences kept the country fragile. The Houthi uprising and the fall of Sana'a. The current conflict began in earnest with the rise of the Houthi movement, a Zaidi Shiite rebel group originating from northern Yemen. The Houthis, feeling marginalized by the central government, led several uprisings against Saleh. However, it wasn't until the 2011 Arab Spring protests that their movement gained momentum. As mass protests forced Saleh to step down, his successor, Abdrabbuh Mansur Hadi, struggled to govern the fractured nation. In 2014, the Houthis seized control of Yemen's capital, Sana'a, forcing Hadi to flee. Their advance was supported by forces still loyal to Saleh, who, despite being ousted, saw an opportunity to regain influence. However, Saleh's alliance with the Houthis was short-lived. In 2017, they turned against him, leading to his assassination. Saudi Arabia and Iran, a proxy war. The war took on an international dimension when Saudi Arabia, alarmed by the Houthi takeover and their alleged ties to Iran, launched a military intervention in 2015. The Saudi-led coalition, backed by the United States and other Western allies, began a relentless bombing campaign, aiming to restore Hadi's government. Iran, a regional rival of Saudi Arabia, was accused of supplying the Houthis with weapons and support, though the extent of their involvement remains debated. The war quickly transformed into a devastating proxy conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran, mirroring the broader Sunni-Shia rivalry in the Middle East. Saudi-led airstrikes have targeted key Houthi strongholds, but the rebels have responded with missile attacks on Saudi cities, further escalating tensions. Humanitarian catastrophe. As the war dragged on, Yemen descended into one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Airstrikes, blockades, and ground battles devastated infrastructure, leaving millions on the brink of famine. Cholera outbreaks ravaged the population, and the healthcare system collapsed. The United Nations described Yemen as the world's worst humanitarian disaster, with over 80% of the population requiring aid. The blockade imposed by the Saudi-led coalition severely restricted access to food, medicine, and fuel, exacerbating the crisis. International humanitarian organizations, including the Red Cross and UNICEF, have struggled to provide assistance due to security concerns and logistical difficulties. The war has also displaced millions, forcing families to live in makeshift camps with inadequate shelter and sanitation. Attempts at peace and the future of Yemen. Despite several ceasefires and peace talks, a lasting resolution remains elusive. The war has fragmented Yemen into different zones of control, with the Houthis dominating the north, the internationally recognized government holding parts of the south, and various separatist and extremist groups further complicating the situation. The rise of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP, and ISIS-affiliated groups has added another dangerous element to the conflict, making peace negotiations even more challenging. Recent diplomatic efforts, including back-channel talks between Saudi Arabia and Iran, have raised hopes for de-escalation. However, rebuilding Yemen will require not only an end to the fighting but also addressing the deep-rooted economic and political grievances that fueled the war in the first place. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, once staunch allies in the intervention, have shown signs of diverging interests, adding another layer of complexity to the situation. International organizations continue to push for a political settlement, but distrust between warring factions remains a major obstacle. Meanwhile, ordinary Yemenis continue to suffer, caught in the crossfire of a war that seems to have no end in sight. The role of the international community. The Yemeni Civil War has drawn attention from world powers, but effective action remains limited. The United Nations has attempted to broker peace deals, but enforcement mechanisms have been weak. The United States and European countries have faced criticism for supplying arms to Saudi Arabia, while also calling for diplomatic solutions. China and Russia have also played roles in shaping the conflict, either by engaging in arms sales or by influencing diplomatic efforts at the United Nations. The conflict is not just a regional issue but a geopolitical flashpoint that could have long-term consequences for global stability. The cost of war. The lives of everyday Yemenis. Beyond the statistics, the war has left an indelible mark on the lives of ordinary people. Families have been torn apart, children have lost access to education, and entire communities have been reduced to rubble. The resilience of the Yemeni people in the face of such adversity is both tragic and inspiring. Stories of parents risking their lives to secure food for their children, of doctors working in bombed-out hospitals, and of volunteers braving the front lines to deliver aid highlight the human spirit's ability to endure even the darkest times. Economic collapse and its impact. Before the war, Yemen was already the poorest country in the Arab world, and the conflict has only deepened its economic woes. The destruction of key infrastructure, including ports, roads, and agricultural lands, has devastated the economy. Inflation has skyrocketed, and millions of Yemenis struggle to afford even the most basic necessities. Black markets have flourished, and war profiteers have exploited the suffering of civilians for their own gain. The future of Yemen. Rebuilding a nation. If Yemen is to have a future, rebuilding must go beyond physical infrastructure. Addressing the underlying political divisions, creating inclusive governance, and investing in long-term economic recovery will be essential. The international community has a role to play, but true peace can only come from within. The lessons of past failed peace agreements must be learned, and all factions must be willing to compromise for the sake of the nation's survival. Conclusion. For an older audience that has witnessed the complexities of Cold War-era proxy conflicts and Middle Eastern power struggles, the Yemeni Civil War serves as a stark reminder of how history often repeats itself. It is a war shaped by both internal divisions and external interference, leaving a nation in ruins and millions of innocent civilians suffering the consequences. Whether peace can be achieved remains uncertain, but understanding the historical and geopolitical intricacies of this war is crucial to grasping its long-term impact on Yemen and the wider world. The tragedy of Yemen is not just its destruction but the world's indifference to the suffering of its people. As the war continues, the question remains, will Yemen find peace, or will it remain a battleground for regional and global powers? The answer lies in the hands of those who hold the power to change the course of history. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and become a part of our community. Here, you will find historical wars, inspiring stories, and unique content based on real events. If you want to see more engaging and fact-based stories, hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest videos instantly. Your support means the world to us. Leave a comment, and let us know what topics you'd like us to cover next. Raising hands fire. Bell, subscribe, share, and help us bring these incredible stories to the world.